What's going on, everyone? So welcome to my latest video. This is part of a series where I focus on a specific director and rank that director's work from worst to best. Done such directors in the past such as Spike Lee, Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, David Fincher, Christopher Nolan, and many more directors. You guys can check out those directors as well as many more directors in my director playlist down below. But guys, you clicked on this video, so you know it. This time around, I'm focusing on John Singleton's films and ranking them from worst to best. Now, he has done 9 films, so I'll be ranking them from 9 being his worst to 1 being his best, and of course, my humble opinion. And also keep in mind, this will not include any short films, music videos, TV shows, none of that. Just specifically speaking, feature-length films. And again, John Singleton has done 9, so I'll be ranking them from 9 being his worst to 1 being his best, and of course, my humble opinion. And I will also be looking forward to seeing your ranking of his work. But guys, enough exposition. Let's get started. So kicking this off, number 9, we have Abduction. Unfortunately, Abduction was the movie that he made last before he passed away. It's a real shame because Abduction is one of the worst movies of the 2010s. I hated this movie with a passion. Just going to leave it at that. I would not recommend this movie to anybody unless you're like myself and is a completionist and trying to watch all of John Singleton's movies. Other than that, avoid at all costs. And that's why it's my number 9. Next up, my number 8, we have Too Fast, Too Furious. This is one of the entries in the Fast and Furious that I especially just do not like. I remember watching it many years ago and just saying to myself, wow, this is like really, really bad. It's a shame because this film and then the other movie that he did, Abduction, these two do not feel like John Singleton in the slightest. They feel more like studio interference involved with these two movies. And you can definitely feel that with Abduction, but also here with Too Fast, Too Furious. And yeah, did not like this movie in the slightest. That's why it is my number 9. My number 8. Next up, my number 7, we have Poetic Justice. So Poetic Justice is one of those movies where I can appreciate with what it's going for, but unfortunately the execution left a lot to be desired. But it is still a well-acted adventure for sure. And yeah, it's pretty middle of the road, but I can see why some people might have this higher up on their list. But for me, it's why it's my number 7. Next up, my number 6, we have Four Brothers. This is a remake of The Sons of Katie Elder, which is ironically a Western that I grew up watching. So watching Four Brothers, it's definitely interesting to see this rendition. And I gotta say, there is some things that I do like. I do think that the dynamics between the brothers is intriguing. It is pretty decently well acted for sure, but the overall execution did leave some desire for me personally. But I can definitely see why this is a movie that many people love. Like if you go on IMDb, many audiences love this movie, and I can definitely see why this has many people putting Four Brothers in their like number 1 or 2 slot in terms of John Singleton's work. But for me, it's more of the middle of the road pack in terms of his work. But still, I can appreciate this movie for what it's going for. But for me, it's kind of middle of the road, and that's why it is middle of the pack. Next up, my number 5, we have Shaft. This was a fun time. It's really all I had to say. I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed Samuel L. Jackson's performance, and I definitely think that it's an interesting movie in its execution, but it really is kind of a fluff piece of a movie. And by that, I mean that watching it in the moment, it's enjoyable. But as the passing of time continues, the more I think about it, the less I actually remember about this movie. And that's why, I'm just being honest with you guys and saying, yeah, I enjoyed it, but I don't really remember much other than I remember Samuel Jackson having a ball and me personally also enjoying the movie because of Samuel Jackson having a ball. But besides that, it's all right. It's all right. And yeah, that's why it's my number 5. Next up, my number 4 is Higher Learning. So this movie I have higher up on the list, despite it being quite flawed. I like the concept. I think that it's intriguing. I do think that it delves into a lot of issues that are intriguing. And I do think that it could have dived a little bit deeper into the actual concept that it's going for, but still, it is very well acted. I really liked the acting. I do like some of John Singleton's directing in this entry as well. And that's why I think that, for me, I have a little bit higher up than Shaft, because there is some things that I do remember about this movie more, in terms of it just really being intriguing in terms of the execution of some things. Again, other parts of this movie did leave a lot to be desired in terms of the execution, but I did like some of this movie in terms of the execution. And again, I liked with what it's going for, but it's definitely a flawed movie for sure. I'm not going to sit here and say oh, it's a fantastic movie, but I did find some elements to be intriguing, and that's why I have it a little bit higher up on the list at my number 4. Next up, my number 3, we have Baby Boy. A movie that, despite being about 30 minutes too long, it's very well acted. I liked John Singleton's directing quite a bit in this movie. I also thought that the themes were quite intriguing. The dialogue is quite hilarious and it feels very authentic. But again, because the movie feels a little bit too long, and I do think that the ending is a little too happy considering everything that we saw before, I still would recommend this movie. Like, I definitely think that this is one of Singleton's best works, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, despite, if you go on my Letterboxd, I do have it a bit lower than what you might expect in terms of me talking positively about this movie, but I still liked it. I just have some issues with it. But still, Baby Boy is my number 3. Next up, my number 2, we have Boys in the Hood. This is a very, very good debut film. John Singleton actually got nominated for Best Director, and he became not only the youngest director to be nominated for Best Director, but also the first African-American director to be nominated for said award. And it's well earned. I mean, the directing here is very good. It's very authentic as well. The dialogue just is so crisp, great performances, and it's also a movie that sticks with you. And that's the thing, though. It sticks with you, but at the same time, watching it, I thought it was rock solid as a whole. Like, it's definitely one of those movies where I understand why so many people love this movie. I understand its place in pop culture. I get why everyone loves it. But for me, I just thought it was rock solid. It's one of those movies where I appreciate more than I fully embraced and said that it's a masterpiece. But again, I really respect this movie. That's why I have it as my number 2. Singleton definitely did a good job, and I see why he got nominated for Best Director. But yeah, it's my number 2. Next up, my number 1. This is the movie that doesn't get talked about enough, and I'm hoping that because it's my number 1 on this list, that more people will seek this movie out. And that is my number 1, which is Rosewood. This is a really, really, really good movie. I watched it last week, and I have to say, keep in mind, I forgot to mention this. I'm filming this in late February of 2024. I watched this last week, and I gotta say, watching it, it really made me angry. And I think that Singleton's directing is so good in this. The performances are so good. The themes are so enriching. The messages also just are so enriching and also insightful. And the story itself, knowing that a lot of what happened actually happened in real life because it's based on a true story. And actually, I did end up watching like a 20-minute video about the history of it and how it got a lot right. It's jaw-dropping. It's saddening. It's a must-see. I don't understand why this movie doesn't get talked about enough, because for me, I wouldn't have watched Rosewood. I wouldn't have even had it on my radar if it wasn't for me trying to watch all of John Singleton's work. And that's sad. And also, I had to get the DVD out at my local library because you can't really find this movie anywhere. It's a shame because this is a good movie. I will say, and this is just something that it seems to be kind of a thing of John Singleton, I do think that the third act, whilst there is some really good things in it, I do think that the third act unfortunately does delve into superhero tendencies. And by that, I mean that it strayed away from the real life story and it added some things that, for the life of me, I do not understand why they added these elements. You'll know it when you see it because for the first 2/3, every single thing about with what happened, you can see it. You can understand, yes, this probably happened 100%. I get it. But the third act, there's some things that happen and you're like, I don't think so. And then you look it up and you're like, yeah, those things were embellished. They were added. They didn't happen. So it's a shame. But overall, I would definitely recommend the film 100%. I think it's a good film. But it is a film that, brace yourselves, it will make you angry as a viewer. And that's by design because Singleton's directing is really, really visceral. It's a really, really well-directed film. And that's why Rosewood's my number 1. But yeah, guys, that's my ranking for John Singleton's work. I do like to talk a little bit about the director. I do think that when Singleton went to his roots and focused on, more heavy films, I think that that's when it works. Like Baby Boy, Boys in the Hood, Rosewood. But then when he goes to studio fare, I feel like those are the ones where it's like, hey, I'm going to make these movies just to pay the bills. Because something like Too Fast, Too Furious, Abduction, really not a fan of. But again, when he actually is going to the movies that you can definitely tell he's passionate about, he's a good director, or was a good director, because he did unfortunately pass. And it's a shame because I would have loved to see him do other films after Abduction, because I just feel like Abduction was just such a terrible, terrible note. But overall, I respect John Singleton, even though some of his movies I do feel are middle of the road, and some of them I think are bad. But again, he did have some pretty good work. And again, I'm glad that I watched all his movies to watch Rosewood alone and Baby Boy. So, but yeah, guys, let me know your ranking of John Singleton's films down below. Do you like them? Do you not? Let me know your ranking in the comment section down below. And as always, don't forget the subscription, notification bell, follow me on Letterboxd, and I will get you guys later.